All right, so that was the drum track added to the mix, and that was Jim's mix down of the drums, which we're going to talk about too because we noticed something about it when we were listening to it, and rather than fix it, we decided we would involve it in the discussion. So, do you mind if I begin talking? Because I noticed something right away that I thought was kind of interesting.
Yeah.
So this is like, you know how when you get a sandwich and it feels incomplete, and then you add melted cheese to it, and it feels like a real sandwich? Do you know what I mean? Like the ingredients just aren't cohering together until you add that cheese sometimes.
Right.
That's what the drums add to this. The drums make this feel like it has a backbone. That it was sort of, it sounded fine before, but it still sounded like I'm in somebody's basement and they're recording songs for their own delight. But when you add those drums in, then it starts sounding like this sounds like a real song, which I think is often the case. I when I first started in a band, we didn't have a drummer for like a year, and our songs just never sounded right because we didn't have drums playing with them. And then the moment we got a drummer, it was like, oh man, we sound like a real band now. So I feel like this really added a whole other level to the song. But why don't you give your reaction as well?
Well, for me, first of all, I've now had to listen to this about 100+ times because of the mixing and sending files and compressing things and making sure that the next person has the layers they need to do their thing. And I always want to try to, why is that getting subdued, this, that, and the other thing. So when I sent you the drums just now, the first question out of my mouth was, are the drums too loud?
Yep.
And
I said yes. And I said yes.
For people listening, I swear to God, the drums just arrived 5 minutes before we started recording here. So in between recording the last episode and this episode, I was mixing the drums in, and so I would have spent probably half an hour doing that properly before the recording if we'd had the time. And
it sounded fine. I just think 20% reduction of the drums.
Absolutely. And if I could have gotten it in separate stems, which is the term, which I don't know if other people know this or not, stems is the term where you get everything in pieces, so each drum bit would be recorded in a different channel. I didn't want to pay the extra money for that. And so if it were me, the cymbals would be a lot softer too.
Oh, so you could turn down each part of the drum?
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah, those are called stems. Yeah, so this is just all of the drums at the same recording level that he gave to us. And it's fine. I'm not going to argue about it.
Now, I do have one minor critique, which might not be a critique because it probably has to do with how our art directions eventually got conveyed and all this stuff. But I remember saying I wanted to really lean on the toms a lot. And I feel like I'm still hearing a lot of snare. Like a lot of snare, which is fine. Most people lean on snare. I don't like drummers leaning on snare. I prefer them to lean on the toms.
And that's what I asked for. I told him I want toms.
And he did put toms in there. He did put them there. It's just, it still sounds so snare driven to me, which I was kind of expecting more of a rolling tom beat, if that makes sense. But again, lean on the toms is vague. It doesn't really tell you, what I don't want to hear is the snare all the time. So that was, the one thing that I noticed, but it wasn't really, I know that like 9 out of 10 people are going to prefer it this way anyway. So it's fine. Go ahead.
Go ahead. For the record, this guy's name is Kotas Vas. He's from Greece, and this was only $22.
And are you happy with the end result? How did you feel about the drums?
Everything we just said, right? Mm-hmm. I wish there had been more toms, less snare, and I wish the cymbals had been softer.
Okay.
If I were doing the remixing at the sound check on stage before they started playing this song, I would make sure that the tom was louder than the cymbals.
I think getting the cymbals down is actually a real challenge too, because I remember when I was in a band, the cymbals were always the thing that you heard in the room. Do you know what I mean? Like they're just loud. So, it's and they do have a tendency to really overshadow a lot of the other sounds that are going on. You almost have to fix it by doing what you said, recording each part of the drums individually and then turning down the cymbals, I think, or requesting that they really play the cymbals light, but then you don't get the same sound out of them if they do that. Right. So,
and we don't run the experiment the way that we wanted to either, right? I think he played all the instruments, all of the pieces of the drum set in the most rudimentary fashion he could, rather than let me explore the different pieces of the cymbal that I could be playing. Let me experiment with different rhythms. different patterns rather, not rhythms, different patterns here. And you're not going to get that for $22. You're not going to get that in a 1-minute song.
No, but he's also very beholden to that bass line. Like, there's only so much he can do once you have a bass line in there.
Right,
you know what I mean?
Right. No, I get it.
And I'm not, and this is an area where my expertise really just falls apart because drumming is not something that I know much about. I do not have good sense of rhythm or time signature, so I'm not equipped to really critique whether that was, well performed drum track. I can say I liked it. I liked what it added, the weight that it added to the song. But I was always somebody, because my time signature skills were weak and my rhythm was weak, I would always lean on other people in the band who had those skills and just let them weigh in. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
And in my family, it's the same thing. I'm surrounded by musicians, and like a fourth of them are really skilled at drums. So I just listen to what they say rather than try to figure it out myself. But I don't know.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
I'm a huge fan of drums when they're done well. And so for me, minute 5 of Still Remains by Fate's Warning is not minute 5 of Still Remains. Sorry, minute 5 of Cheyenne by John Arch. Mike Portnoy plays the drums in that song. There's this transcendental shift in the rhythm and in the patterns he's playing that just blow me away. And when drums are done that well, or when Carey in Tool does something amazing at the end of 46 and 2 or Eulogy or whatever song he's playing, you take notice. You can't not notice that those people are doing something amazing with drums. And I think I don't want to beat down on anybody. I love the song that we have so far, right? Mm-hmm. I've listened to it a lot, and I still really, really like what we have so far for so little money. And I would rather listen to this than any song by Motley Crue, right? Because Motley Crue is just going to phone in certain parts of what they do. And even if Tommy's playing drums as great as he can, he's the only part of the band I'm noticing. Does that make sense? That was a roundabout way to getting my point.
There's definitely Motley Crue songs I would like to hear. I don't know if I want to. I don't know if we're quite ready to compare ourselves to other bands yet.
No. I didn't mean to try to compare. I was trying to get to a bigger point, and I don't think I got there because I drove down a bad road.
That's fair. That's fair. No, I get what you're saying. If I want to like call out Motley Crue, I want to make sure that we're bringing our A game with our $50 guitar tracks.
Right. So let me reiterate. I'm not trying to compare.
Yeah.
I was trying to use it as an analogy that there's only one part of that band I like.
Okay, I get you.
Does that make sense?
So wait, when you listen to Motley Crue, you're only listening to the drums?
Yeah, because the rest of them bother me.
Oh, that's interesting. Okay, I see. I don't have that experience with them, so that's.
Yeah.
I almost don't notice his playing actually. Because again, I'm not a big drum person, so I don't really,
Right.
if the drums are really disruptive, I'll notice, or if they're exceptional like Tool, I'll notice. But otherwise, I'll just kind of just focus on other instruments.
And that was my point. Is there are bands that are exceptional where you notice the drumming, bam, you can't miss it. And then there's bands like Motley Crue who I think phone it in. Personally, that's my feeling about Motley Crue. So the only thing I'm noticing in that band is the drums, and I'm not noticing them because they're exceptional. I'm noticing them because everybody is just so flat.
Well, this is interesting because when we did the the Dirt episode, I know I'm going off on a little tangent, but I think it is kind of relevant. I made a point of listening to Motley Crue's like Mick Mars' guitar playing, for example, and things like that to see because I didn't remember, was he a really good guitarist or not? Do you know what I'm saying? Yeah. And I actually had a hard time analyzing it because his style of guitar playing is so different from what I tend to gravitate towards and what I would do myself when I was playing that I almost couldn't assess it. Do you know, I was like, I don't know how to rate this in terms of quality. And so what I started focusing on instead was the songwriting. And when I focused on the songwriting, I started to see what Motley Crue does well is the songwriting. I think the Nikki Sixx element is the most important element of the band because it was the songs more than the performance that I think was what was kind of getting traction with me as a listener. But But again, I here I feel like I want to make sure I understand what you're saying. Are you saying that the drum track to this, is it too pedestrian for you, or are you saying that it's more in the realm of the drummers that you like?
Yeah, what I'm saying is that this is pretty pedestrian drumming, but it's not hurting the song in any way, right? We didn't have enough time or enough money. Yeah. He did his job. I am not complaining whatsoever. I gave him 5 stars, right? Now that I know how to do this, now that I know how to do this better, I won't say I know how to do this. I'm still level 0. I know what I will ask for next time. I know what I will, excuse me, lose my voice. I know what I will go for next time in terms of what each instrument is supposed to be doing. And you're right, we should map things better.
Well, but that's an interesting point.
Making excuses for ourselves, even though we said this is an experiment.
Yeah, well, I think there's a difference between explaining and making excuses. I think we both are acknowledging we're not particularly good at this, right? Because this is our first effort. But we definitely also can see what we're doing wrong as we're doing it. And so a lot of the reasons we're proposing are, this is something we want to try to do differently next time. With the drums, I think it's interesting because in this case, you kind of need a pedestrian drum beat, like you're saying. And what you're proposing with the more outlandish drums could very easily go off the rails if it isn't well constructed, because the moment you start doing unusual drum rhythms, that drives the song in a whole different direction into potentially other genres, right? So
absolutely.
Which I'm fine with, but the question is, will we veer outside of metal if we do you know what I'm saying? Like I said, like there are other genres that are more about the beat, and I like those genres. You know, I've talked about Destiny's Child a lot on this podcast, much to your anger, but you know, but I really like the beat in Destiny's Child. I like the vocal stylings and all these other things that you wouldn't generally hear in metal. And when you introduce more nuanced rhythms to metal, it's just a tricky line to walk.
It would have been nice to give him a gap for a drum fill. It would have been nice for him to come in with some sort of, stargazer kind of opening where he does whatever he wants until he's now matching the beat of the song.
But to do that,
those little touches would have been fun.
You have to record the drums first to do that, though. That's the only way.
I know.
Or you have to have everybody in the same room,
right?
Which isn't going to happen, I'm presuming, unless we only hire people from the same city and demand.
Or what you do is you put the song together professionally on a better program than GarageBand, and then you're able to say, okay, here's $20 more. Give me a drum fill at the beginning.
That's not going to work. That's not going to work, and I'll tell you why. That's going to sound very disjointed if you do it that way. Like I know people do that, but a lot of times when I hear songs that are constructed that way, I feel like it sucks out the energy that you need.
Fair enough.
So I think if we wanted to do it, we would need to have the drummer and bassist work together and record the drum track first. That would be.
And there's got to be a Fiverr company that does that, right? There's got to be a team that'll give you the bass line and the drums together for $185.
It would be interesting to see if there are groups on there, actually. Because maybe there are people that can all record in the same studio. Do you know what I mean? Maybe you could get a band recording and then a separate vocalist, for example. Right. But then you're stuck with whatever, that band, maybe the guitarist is a 10, but the drummer's a 2 and the bassist is a 3. It's a little harder to calibrate all that stuff. But yeah, so I don't know. I thought this was interesting. It added a cool backbone to the song. And it just sounds like we kind of need to mix it a little bit more. And now you're having thoughts that maybe when we do this again, we can start thinking in terms of different rhythms, which I guess you would have to specify, like, this is the beat per minute I want. This is the time signature I want. This is the shift in time signature I want. Which would really facilitate getting different kinds of drum sounds, I would think.
Right.
Now, how comfortable do you feel doing that? Like, I know you're a fan of drums, but as a fan, do you, like, if you hear a time signature, can you say, yeah, that's like this time signature?
No, my ear isn't that precise. I'll have to go and look at the sheet music, right, and figure out.
Okay.
I can tell you that certain songs, because certain songs I just listened to enough times. Oh, that's 6/8 instead of 3/4.
Yeah.
Or whatever. But I'm not that good. I'm not a theorist, and I'm not. my little training in music was the acoustic guitar in 7th grade, and then I taught myself a few things on the piano once I figured out where the keys were.
Okay.
When I was in 8th grade, I guess.
I did have to learn by sheet music, and that wasn't all I did, but they did. The guitar teacher made me do the sheet music thing, and you used to have to do the time signature. Like you have to read the time signature and play the time signature, but it was never something I was. As I've said, I'm a lot more attuned to the micro beats that are going on than to the broader time signature.
Yeah, I had a music class in 7th grade before my guitar class. I was at a different junior high school, and I learned all about how to read notes and everything like that. And I loved that class, but I moved school, so I didn't get any further in that. And then I went and took acoustic guitar, and I was behind the curve all the time, and I got frustrated because I couldn't catch up.
Honestly, I feel like they should teach that to all kids in school. Like, it's not that hard if you learn it.
What, music?
Yeah, like we all had music class, but like it was never a consistent part of the curriculum the way that math is. So like in math, you make sure the kids learn these basic elements of math by the time they're in a certain age. Right. Music was so inconsistent. All I remember from when I was a kid is learning the recorder one year where we never actually looked at at sheet music at all. I don't even remember what method we used to do our recital. And then sometimes using sheet music, but so from the hip that it wasn't like anybody knew what the notes on the page were. We were just looking at the lyrics on the sheet as we sang them and following the melody that we all knew. And I think it was only when people got into high school and took chorus or music as an elective of some kind that they would actually start to seriously learn that stuff. It just makes more sense to teach them at a younger age. And to consistently teach sheet music so that they understand how to read it and all that. But I will say this, I'm pretty ashamed of how badly I understand time signatures. Not something I'm happy to admit, but it's just the truth. And so I want to be clear about it when we're evaluating the drums. So I guess, do we have anything else to add to this, or are we all set on the drum section of the program?
No, I think that this was pretty much the most straightforward part of the song.
Yep.
Right? He doesn't have a single drum fill in here. He just plays the beat. And it's exactly what we needed for this kind of experiment.
Yeah. And I will say, he did seem to be emphasizing giving this a heavy sound. Do you know what I mean? Like I did notice that there was something he was doing with the beats that he was doing that were giving the bass a lot more heaviness.
Now, there are effects that I can use in GarageBand to try to make it deeper if I wanted to. I haven't touched any of it yet because, again, we had it for 5 minutes before we started recording. So,
I mean, I don't know. I mean, if we can get... I think we would need a real I wish I had a guitar because I could just record, like, just distorted notes over it and see what happens. But I think... just leave it as is. We don't need to muck with it too much. So we'll be back on with the vocals next episode. And you said we have 3 tracks of vocals. Is that
right now? We only have one has turned her work in. The other 2 have not.
Okay, and we found some very interesting vocalists on there. So I think we got some. We'll talk about the results next episode. And until then, we'll talk to you later.